In the heart of the American Southwest, where the sun scorches the earth and the wind carries only silence, lies one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. This is Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, a remote and unforgiving desert that was once the center of a civilization so advanced, so ambitious, that archaeologists are still struggling to understand how it was built and why it was abandoned. For over 3 centuries, between roughly 850 and 1150 AD, the people we now call the ancestral Puebloans constructed here a network of massive stone buildings unlike anything else in North America. They called their greatest achievement Pueblo Bonito, a single structure containing over 800 rooms, rising 5 stories high, housing hundreds if not thousands of people at its peak. Standing at the base of its walls today, you feel the weight of that ambition in every fitted stone, each block cut, shaped, and laid by human hands without metal tools, without the wheel, without beasts of burden. The masonry alone is breathtaking. Distinct bands of large and small stones create a signature pattern that engineers today still struggle to fully replicate. A precision that speaks of deep knowledge, long tradition, and extraordinary organizational power. Beneath and around the great houses, hundreds of circular chambers were dug into the earth. The kivas, sacred spaces where ceremonies were performed, decisions were made, and the spiritual life of the community was sustained. The great kivas were the largest of these, enormous circular underground rooms capable of holding hundreds of people simultaneously. Their walls plastered smooth, their floors carefully prepared for ritual. Chaco Canyon was not merely a town or a city. It was a ceremonial and political center, a place of pilgrimage, the hub of a regional network stretching across hundreds of miles of the ancient Southwest. Perfectly straight roads radiated outward from Chaco in all directions, engineered highways up to 30 feet wide, cutting across the landscape in ruler-straight lines regardless of terrain, connecting the canyon to dozens of outlying communities. At its height, Chaco Canyon was the beating heart of a world that stretched from southern Utah to northern Mexico, from eastern Colorado to the Arizona desert, the largest pre-Columbian civilization north of Mexico. Yet for all its power and reach, Chaco Canyon was abandoned. Completely. By the mid-1100s, the great houses stood empty. The kivas were silent. The roads led nowhere, and no one has ever fully explained why. This is the story of one of archaeology's greatest unsolved mysteries, the sudden and total collapse of the Chaco Canyon great houses and the civilization that built them. To understand the collapse, we must first understand the sky, because the Chacoans were obsessed with it. Their buildings were precisely aligned to solar and lunar cycles, their windows and doorways functioning as astronomical instruments. On the summer solstice, sunlight daggers through specially positioned rock slabs to bisect spiral petroglyphs carved into canyon walls. A solar calendar of extraordinary precision that governed the rhythm of Chacoan life. At the winter solstice sunrise, the sun rises through a natural notch in the canyon wall and its light falls through a specific doorway in Pueblo Bonito, an alignment so precise it could not possibly be accidental, built into the very architecture of the great house. The Chacoans understood the cosmos and embedded that understanding in stone. Their buildings were not merely shelters but instruments for reading time, predicting seasons, and maintaining their relationship with the forces that governed their world. But the cosmos could not save them from the earth, and the earth of Chaco Canyon was already working against them long before the collapse came. The canyon sits in one of the most environmentally marginal locations in North America. Annual rainfall is barely 10 inches. The growing season is dangerously short. The soil is thin and easily exhausted. It was never an easy place to live. And yet the Chacoans chose this place. Perhaps because of its very harshness, because difficulty and sacred power have always walked together in human experience, or perhaps because the canyon's unique geology amplified sound and gave certain locations a quality unlike anywhere else. Whatever drew them here, sustaining a large population in Chaco Canyon required a system of extraordinary reach and complexity, a redistribution network that pulled food, water, timber, and luxury goods from across the entire Southwest. The wooden roof beams alone tell a staggering story of that system. Chaco Canyon has no trees. Not a single large tree grows in the canyon today, and there is no evidence it was ever forested. Yet the great houses required over 200,000 massive wooden beams. Those beams came from forests in the Zuni and Chusca Mountains, up to 50 miles away. Every single beam was cut, stripped, and carried by human labor across the desert, without wheels, without draft animals, purely by the organized effort of thousands of people. The scale of that effort, repeated over decades and centuries, tells us something profound about the power and authority of whoever was organizing and commanding the Chacoan system. That authority appears to have been concentrated in the hands of a small elite, a ruling class whose power is visible in death as much as in life. In the burial chambers of Pueblo Bonito, archaeologists found individuals interred with tens of thousands of turquoise beads and shell ornaments, a concentration of wealth with no parallel in the ancient Southwest. These were not ordinary people. These were individuals whose social distance from the rest of the population was as vast as the canyon itself. Buried in luxury, while evidence suggests that many other Chacoans were chronically malnourished and physically stressed. The inequality embedded in the Chacoan system may itself have been a structural weakness, a source of internal tension that made the civilization vulnerable when external pressures arrived. And the external pressures were coming. They were written in the wood, in the rings of the trees, a record of rainfall and drought preserved in timber that outlasted the civilization that cut it. Dendrochronology, the science of reading tree rings, has given archaeologists a year-by-year climate record for the ancient Southwest. And what it shows for the mid-1100s is devastating. Beginning around 1130 AD, a catastrophic drought gripped the Colorado Plateau. Not a single bad year, not a short dry spell, but a prolonged, grinding, multi-decade failure of rainfall that struck at the very foundations of Chacoan survival. The Chaco Wash stopped flowing. Fields failed. The elaborate water management systems that had sustained the canyon through previous dry years were overwhelmed by the sheer duration and severity of the drought. Food stores were exhausted. The redistribution network that had made Chaco powerful now became a liability. The outlying communities that had once sent surplus food to the canyon had nothing left to send. Population pressure had already stripped the canyon's immediate environment of whatever limited resources it had. Firewood was gone. Wild game was gone. The fragile desert ecosystem around the great houses had been pushed beyond its capacity to recover. But drought alone may not explain everything. The archaeological record of Chaco Canyon's final years is disturbing in ways that go beyond environmental failure. In some rooms of the great houses, there is evidence of violence. Burned structures, scattered bodies, signs of conflict that suggest the collapse was not merely a quiet and orderly migration away from a failing environment. In other rooms, there is evidence of deliberate destruction, kivas that were intentionally filled and sealed, great house rooms whose roofs were carefully removed rather than simply abandoned, suggesting a ritualized and perhaps planned process of closure. Some researchers believe the Chacoan elite were overthrown, that a system of extreme inequality, sustained by ideological power and physical coercion, finally broke under the weight of its own contradictions when the drought removed the material basis for elite claims to authority. If the elite promised their followers connection to the cosmos, control of the seasons, the favor of the gods, and then the rains stopped and the crops failed year after year, what happened to that promise? What happened to those who had made it? The silence of the canyon after 1150 AD is a kind of answer. Whatever happened in those final years, drought, violence, political collapse, or some combination of all three, the result was total. The great houses were not gradually scaled back. They were not repurposed for other uses. They were not reoccupied by smaller groups of squatters. They were left, completely, permanently. The doors were sealed. The roads fell silent. And the people who had built the most sophisticated civilization in North American prehistory walked away, dispersed to the north, to the south, to the highlands of Mesa Verde, to the river valleys of the Rio Grande, carrying with them the knowledge and traditions that would seed new communities across the Southwest. The civilization did not die. Transformed. The descendants of the Chacoan builders are alive today, the Pueblo peoples of New Mexico and Arizona, the Hopi, the Zuni, the Acama, the dozens of Rio Grande Pueblo communities whose oral traditions carry the memory of Chaco forward across 9 centuries. For these living communities, Chaco Canyon is not merely an archaeological site. It is an ancestral homeland, a sacred landscape, a place whose power has not diminished with abandonment, but has instead deepened with time and memory. Their voices are an essential part of any honest attempt to understand Chaco. not merely as data, not merely as informants, but as the rightful interpreters of their own ancestors' world. And modern science is continuing to reveal new dimensions of that world. LiDAR technology, laser scanning from aircraft, has recently revealed additional road segments, previously unknown structures, and landscape modifications that suggest the Chacoan system was even larger and more organized than anyone previously imagined. Genetic studies of ancient Chacoan remains are beginning to reveal patterns of kinship and migration that rewrite our understanding of who the ruling elite were and how power was transmitted across generations at Chaco. Chemical analysis of artifacts continues to extend the known boundaries of the Chacoan trade network. Cacao residues in cylinder jars proving contact with Mesoamerican civilizations 1,000 miles to the south, copper bells and scarlet macas imported from Mexico for elite ritual use. Every new discovery adds complexity to a story that already defies simple explanation. A story that is not about failure but about the extraordinary and ultimately unsustainable ambition of a people who built something that had never been built before and has never been built since. The great houses still stand. Crumbling, yes. Eroded by 900 years of wind and rain and neglect. But standing. The walls of Pueblo Bonito still rise to their second and third stories in places. The masonry still tight, still precise, still a testament to the hands that built it. Walk through those rooms today and you walk through the silence of a civilization that burned at maximum intensity for 3 centuries and then, for reasons we are still debating, went dark. The mystery of Chaco Canyon is not merely archaeological. It is a mirror held up to every complex society that has ever existed. A reminder that no system of power, however sophisticated, however spiritually justified, however architecturally magnificent, is permanent. The canyon endures. The desert endures. The sky above it endures. The same sun rising through the same notch in the canyon wall, illuminating the same doorway in Pueblo Bonito every winter solstice morning, finding no one home to witness it. But the people endure too. In the pueblos of New Mexico and Arizona, in the languages and ceremonies and pottery traditions and oral histories of communities that have survived colonization, forced relocation, and 9 centuries of unimaginable change. They are still here. And Chaco Canyon, in their understanding, was never truly abandoned. It was completed. Its purpose fulfilled. Its power transferred to the living communities that carry its legacy forward into a future the original builders could not have imagined. The great houses of Chaco Canyon fell silent in the 12th century. But the story they tell about ambition and inequality, about climate and collapse, about the fragility of complex systems and the resilience of human communities, that story has never been more alive than it is today. Science keeps listening. The stones keep speaking. And every year, new tools and new questions pull another layer of truth from the silence of the canyon, adding depth to a mystery that grows richer the longer it is studied. What collapsed at Chaco was not just an architecture of stone. It was an architecture of belief, of obligation, of social contract between those who ruled and those who labored, between those who read the sky and those who trusted that reading to keep them alive. When that contract broke, when the sky offered no rain and the elite offered no answers, the people made a choice. Not to die beside the empty great houses, but to walk away and begin again somewhere else. That decision, to leave, to adapt, to carry forward what was essential and abandon what had failed, may be the most important thing the Chacoans ever did. It is why their descendants are alive today. This is Chaco Canyon. This is what was built here. This is what was lost. And this, in the living communities, in the turning of the seasons, in the winter solstice sun still finding that ancient doorway, this is what remains.